Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Album Fight Club. I am your host, Mike Kane, along with my co-host Cody Constantine. We're here
Hey, how
once
are you?
again. We're here. We're good. We're ready to talk some more music. Now, as far as the matchup today, Cody, if I remember correctly, this was one of your picks in terms of suggestions. If I remember,
I believe so. Today we are looking at Black Sabbath's Paranoid in comparison with their later release Master of Reality.
indeed. Now, any metal fan should know, but in case there are a few out there who don't, any metal fan should know a couple things. One is that a lot of people sort of emulate Black Sabbath as like the first true heavy metal band. Obviously, Led Zeppelin and some other bands are thrown in the conversation, but a lot of people sort of go to the Black Sabbath route. And any Black Sabbath, and again, this is truly debatable, but in a lot of camps, it's a lot like Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, where typically what usually comes down to the best two for Black Sabbath is Master of Reality and Paranoid. Some people throw Heaven and Hell in there, which I think is also a great record. But as far as like definitely Ozzy era Black Sabbath, it's usually these two. And in terms of true diehard Black Sabbath fans, a lot of them would immediately say, perhaps like Cody, that Master of Reality is by far the better record. There should be no discussion here. But I deign to say that these two definitely have a place in this matchup. And I may even go so far as to say, hold on to your horses, Cody, that I might like Paranoid better.
That is interesting. You
Yeah.
have completely assumed wrong on
Oh,
my stance.
really?
1,000,000%.
Wow.
I think that Paranoid, obviously not only being one of the top three greatest, I guess true metal records of all time, but I think it blows Master of Reality completely out of the water. So much so that I almost have no endearing things to say about Master of Reality.
Wow, you are right. I was going into this thinking that, for audience, I was going into this thinking that Cody was for sure going to ride Master of Reality as like the better record. So, I mean, when I say I like Paranoid better, that's only because in my years of listening to Black Sabbath, I've always just gone to Paranoid more than Master. But as I was telling you prior to starting this recording, there are some matchups here where I'm kind of at a loss, where I think both songs really bring something to the table. Um, and again, there are other matchups here where it's no competition, and like we'll get into those as we get into those. But as a preliminary intro, Cody, you have definitely kicked the door in as far as what I thought you were going to say.
I think that similar with what we discussed about Metallica the other day, Master of Reality would be some other band's perfect record. That would be their swan song. But in comparison to Black Sabbath and its core four individuals, I think that Paranoid stands atop of that mountain as arguably their finest cohesive moment as a band.
But you are aware that many Black Sabbath fans would disagree with that claim. I feel
Yeah,
like we're in the
that's fine.
minority here.
We
Yeah.
are in the minority. Now, would you like to just go ahead and get straight into this? Because I think we're going to have I have a lot to say personally about Sweet Leaf in comparison to War Pigs.
Would you like to begin that discussion?
I would.
Okay, go for it.
And here is War Pigs is an excellent song. I don't think there is any other song that would that could have started this record if you look at the track listing. But Mike, as I was telling you off the camera and off the mic before we started recording, Master of Reality had three moments that made me genuinely headbang. Like volume up in the car, headbang. In comparison to where Paranoid the entire time I was just all smiles. And for me, Sweet Leaf is the start of that record kind of seeping in a little bit. Personally, as somebody, so my birthday is April 21st. I'm stuck right in the middle of what I like to call the hippie holiday, where the day before is 420. So what we will just recognize as National Sweet Leaf Day. And then
Yes.
the day after is what, Earth Day. And so
Oh.
Sweet Leaf is ingrained in my head as this like, oh yeah, it's like the day before my birthday. And the riff for Sweet Leaf is impeccable, but it doesn't hold anywhere near the um, theatricality of War Pigs. It doesn't. The tones, in my opinion, are worse. Ozzy Osbourne feels like he didn't really try it on the lyrics, where you get to like War Pigs, and I feel like he has something to say. That whole
For
song feels like everybody in that band has something to say.
for sure. Man, Cody, you were surprising me left and right here. I thought for sure you were gonna defend Sweetleaf more. Not to say you hate Sweetleaf, obviously. You like it a lot, but I thought you were gonna like definitely ride it in this matchup. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I definitely mentioned this off camera, is that a lot, yeah, I did mention this. A lot of these matchups are very difficult for me. I think, despite how I feel about both these records, track by track matchups, there's certainly a lot of competition. However, with this first one, it's no contest. Um, it's sort of like a Master of Puppets moment for me, where War Pigs is quite possibly one of the greatest things that metal has ever produced.
Ever.
And it's strange because when you break down what's happening in War Pigs, you got so many moments where it's like, I feel like metal's done this better so many times. And yet, in spite of that, every time that song plays, every second, every moment, I'm like, oh my God, could they made this any better? I mean, literally the first hit of notes, like the second it starts, I'm like, all right, let's go. Like, I don't care if this is 20 minutes long, I'm here for it. You mentioned the lyrics. I think the lyrics are amazing. It's one of the greatest protest songs I think ever written.
Ever.
And in particular, the Luke's Wall portion, like the last like minute and a half, is probably some of my favorite music in any genre ever. There's just something about that last minute and a half that is so triumphant, so like in your face. It just sounds like infinity to me. It sounds like it goes off and on forever.
Yeah.
Sweet Leaf, again, it's great. It's got a cool riff. It's just a great sort of vibey track to open Master of Reality with, and I think it's a great opener for that album. But in terms of opening tracks, I think War Pigs sounds greater, has done more for the legacy of the band and metal in general, and I think is just honestly a perfect song. I wouldn't change a second of it.
Now, I think it is important to recognize that for a lot of metal people, they would acknowledge Sweet Leaf as the beginning of the genre stoner metal, which is really, really cool, because without, say, Tony Iommi kind of stumbling upon that riff, we wouldn't have Caius, we wouldn't have Sleep, we wouldn't have like Doom Riders, we wouldn't have a lot of those great bands. So I think it is important to recognize that although maybe Mike and I stand on a very similar side here, Sweet Leaf arguably did start an entire genre of metal.
And that's perhaps a conversation for after the track by track, is which album did more for metal in general. Because you're right in that doom metal, stoner metal, sludge sort of like has a lot of influence from Master of Reality. And I think Paranoid doesn't have as far incurring in terms of like starting or birthing genres, but maybe it has more just in terms of the genre of metal itself. Not entirely sure. I don't know if that's a conversation that we even can answer, but both records certainly have stake in terms of the metal genre for sure.
Yes.
So unanimously here, War Pigs. Again, shocking me to my core, but here we are. Maybe this next matchup. See, this is again, I don't know here. So we have Paranoid off Paranoid and After Forever off Master of Reality. As far, man, see, this is where it gets tough. I don't. You already know which one?
Yeah. Paranoid is Airbud right now, and nothing is beating Airbud. In my opinion, and Mike, I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate this conversation.
No, please.
After Forever drags. It felt lackluster. It didn't really seem like what I would even consider to be a Black Sabbath like song. I didn't get really any kind of like those old school Sabbath feels from it. And later on in their career, you know, they would go on to do more things. They'd introduce a piano. They'd introduce maybe some ballads and things like that. Um, but it felt very lackluster as the second song on a Sabbath record. Where in comparison, you have Paranoid, which is one of the greatest riffs of all time. Consistent every single time I listen to it. I smile. It's short. It's sweet. It feels like Black Sabbath haven't burned themselves out yet. And I really feel like, once again, Ozzy Osbourne, younger Osbourne, tried more things, like lyrically.
So my sort of issuance here is that I love both these tracks. I don't think After Forever goes on too long. I do think there is a claim to be made that it's sort of like, I forget how you put it, but it's sort of, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It feels similar.
Yeah.
And that might be because of its length. It's just a longer song. However, and I do agree that Paranoid is great, and I do agree that Paranoid has one of the best riffs ever, and I do agree that it is a staple Black Sabbath song. There's actually a YouTube channel called Thralls of Metal. I'm just going to give a brief shout out here. They did an entire discography ranking of Black Sabbath records. And I forget the guy's name, but he said that Paranoid is the best metal song I never need to hear again. And I kind of see what he's saying, in that it's so iconic, it's so ubiquitous, it's so of the genre of metal that honestly it's kind of reached this point of like, it's so elevated, and it's so, I do feel the song is a bit repetitive. Now that's not an issue wholeheartedly, because the song's pretty short. It doesn't overstay its welcome at all. It gets in, it gets out. But in terms of variation in the song, it doesn't really vary at all. And maybe that's because the riff is so good, and maybe that's because the performances are so good, but like, it kind of does the same thing for the entire length of the track. Whereas After Forever does some different stuff. And that's where I'm sort of stuck in, is that Paranoid is incredible. It's earned its pedigree, but it's also very similar. After Forever, maybe not better riff, maybe not better performances, but at least it tries something different. So that's the sort of sticky wicket I'm in the middle of right now. I think I'm leaning more towards Paranoid just because of how great it is, but I think that guy really had a point when he said it's kind of the greatest metal song I never need to hear again. Like, I could die happy not ever hearing this song again.
Well, I think in that perspective, it's important to look at that thought process and then try and like adapt it to other songs. Like, for example, if I never have to hear Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden ever again.
No, watch it.
I love Iron Maiden. I don't think that I would be okay. But maybe if I hadn't heard Paranoid for, say, 2 or 3 months, if somehow I had just avoided hearing that song, and I heard that riff start up again, immediately I would feel like a child. I would just be ecstatic. You know? And it is important to recognize that, yes, After Forever does try new things. It feels like Black Sabbath is kind of branching out a little more, attempting new sounds. The intro sound to the song did kind of surprise me. I don't know if it was like a keyboard or whatever that noise was. I did go, oh, okay, I like this. But at the same time, Paranoid's like a BLT. It's perfect. Eventually, yeah, you might get sick of a BLT, but if you don't have a BLT 2 months in a row and you come back to the BLT, I know what this does and I'm happy about it.
Very fair point. Yeah, it's really hard to argue against Paranoid, the song. Mm-hmm. Just kind of perfect, kind of like War Pigs. So at the moment, we're 2 for 2 in terms of Paranoid being perfect so far. And I wouldn't change the order up to this point. I think War Pigs followed by Paranoid is just fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned that moment in After Forever at the beginning where it's like either a keyboard or a synth or something. This is sort of off kilter here, but I'm pretty sure it's the same intro to Beat It by Michael Jackson. But Beat It is just slightly pitch shifted down an octave or something. So when I revisiting Master Reality for this episode, I was like, is that Beat It? Is that the opening of Beat It? It was a very odd moment because obviously Black Sabbath was before Michael Jackson. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what came across. So Paranoid currently 2 for 2.
And once again, and I
yeah.
can't state this enough, Master of Reality, if it was another band, would be their high watermark.
Mm-hmm.
It's
For sure.
just, I think it's just one of those deals where it's like, it's kind of like Back in Black. You guys fucking nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody walked in with their game faces on, and they nailed it the entire thing. And that's how I feel about Paranoid, where it's they were young and hungry, and they had the world in front of them, and they didn't know what was coming next. Where Master of Reality, I assume they had been touring a lot, all these things. That the road winds you down. And when you do attempt new things, you have to make sure that those new things are cohesive with the overall sound that you want. Just like with the last episode with Escape. Someone could have said, hey, I know we need one more song. It's not this one. Let's take one more week, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to think that, like, these were the first guys to do it, more or less, right? To think that these guys did War Pigs before metal was really understood at all. And I mean, again, Led Zeppelin, yada yada, right? But to do Paranoid and Master of Reality, because I think they were a year apart from each other. I think War Pigs was 70 and Master of Reality was 71, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
To do so, really not a long time between the records, and to do this like wave of whatever the hell this thing is we're doing, and kind of influence everything that came after, it's kind of remarkable. It's sort of like a Beatles thing, but of course for metal, which maybe that speaks more to Paranoid than Master. Again, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
So this is where the track by track sort of falls apart. This idea of what we do on this podcast, and again, I know this is a flawed system. I know it's not perfect, but I like sort of what it sets up here. But in moments like this, where we get to the third track on each album, you have Planet Caravan for Paranoid, and then Embryo on Master of Reality, which is just at best an interlude track.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, it is unfair to compare these two because Planet Caravan is deemed an entire song, whereas Embryo is just like this interlude. So of course, unless you're going to shock me again, of course, Planet Caravan wins this matchup. So maybe it shouldn't be counted. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to these two.
So what if we did this? Because I'm looking at... Now, I listened to the record on Spotify, so the Spotify listing might be a little different. Okay. So it's showing here, let me just pull up Spotify actually. It's showing that it's Embryo, into Children of the Grave, and then into Orchid.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd be down to count. If you would want to add those three together. But then the issue becomes...
So here's just what I was thinking. I think that, and I don't know how you feel about this, but for me, Planet Caravan's actually one of the weakest songs on Paranoid.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. It's cool. It's different. It's sort of vibey. But at the end of the day, it's not the one, like if someone said, cut a song off this album, it's either this or something else, which we'll get to later. But Planet Caravan's definitely bottom tier. It's still great. I still love it, but it's still bottom tier. Embryo, again, is just kind of an introduction to Children of the Grave. That's really all the purpose it serves.
Yeah.
So I think we just don't count it because they're like, just not that it would go either. I think both of us would say Planet Caravan, right?
Yeah.
And I think by the end of this, we'll both kind of be in the Paranoid camp by the end of all the track by tracks. Embryo's cool. I don't hate it, obviously. I think it's a cool little interlude, but it just it can't really compete against a song like Planet Caravan just for what it is at its core.
I actually got a lot of enjoyment out of listening to Embryo because it felt, you could see the through line of like metal history. That sounds like the intro to Fight Fire with Fire.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time, the 28 seconds that that song is happening, I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I could see James Hetfield being like, yo, guys, that's sick. Let's do this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if they ever paid Metallica for that, or if they ever paid Sabbath for that little royalty. Hope
well,
they
then,
did.
I feel like so many bands would have to go to Black Sabbath and be like, hey man, that riff we did, yeah, you guys, I feel like every single song on both these records they'd get like billions off of, for how many metal bands have like sort of taken the sound, taken the style of what this band did on these two records.
See, if I had the ability to go back in time, I would tell Tony Iommi to patent the process of taking a guitar and tuning it down to drop D. I'd be like, Tony, get on it right now. In 50 years, everybody's going to be this band Rage Against the Machine is going to happen, and every single person's going to get on it. You're going to be like the dude with penicillin.
And can we just, I know we're only 3 tracks in, can we speak for a second of how good this composition of musicians is? Like, I think, honestly, the weakest member is Ozzy.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of because Ozzy as a lyricist, or as a vocalist, I think he's just kind of, he does the job. And I wouldn't, Ronnie James Dio, who was a later interpretation of Black Sabbath, I think smokes Ozzy in terms of vocal style. But for these early records, I wouldn't replace Ozzy as a vocalist because I think Ozzy really brings something to these songs. But when you talk about Tony, Geezer, and Bill Ward, like those 3 guys, like Jesus Christ, like talk about guys at the peak level of their instruments.
Yeah, that should have been like a Guitar Hero boss battle. Or like a rock band boss battle. Those 3 against whatever little starter band you have.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
As a bass player, the amount of respect that I have for Geezer Butler is almost immeasurable.
Yeah.
He is somebody who always tried new things, and I think he set the standard also alongside of like Jack Bruce from Cream. He set the standard of bass doesn't have to be big guitar. If I want to run out for a second, like what's the song? NIB. That's a standard. War Pigs is a standard.
And it's weird how he basically plays lead bass, which sounds weird, but like he's doing things on the bass throughout songs we've covered already that are not just like complementing what the guitar is doing, just in like a lower register. He's actually like doing his own riffs over here while the guitar is doing its thing over here. And it's just so strange, but like so cool at the same time.
Well, I think the true measure of individualized musicians are important. But the true measure of a band, in my opinion, is the thought of how well can everybody navigate their sonic space while still being respectful to the song and the other players.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes Sabbath so incredible, because everybody in that band is setting off the masterclass of how to do this new style of music. But they're not doing it in a way to where it feels flashy. They're doing it in a way that almost is like they know they're giving the blueprint. Just take it from here.
And it's funny to see early videos of them where they're doing live shows and they look like they're like in pajamas, like they're so underdressed, but it's kind of cool. Like
it is really cool.
Yeah.
It's like seeing videos of Zeppelin play like high school gyms.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, none of you kids knew that they were going to write Stairway to Heaven. Not a single person knew that was coming.
Yeah. So next matchup in track by track, and I'm really interested to hear what you say about this one. It's Iron Man versus Children of the Grave.
You should go first.
Okay, I'll go first. This is one that's actually really, really, really hard for me. So I'll just start with Iron Man. So obviously it's Iron Man, right? It's like, you talked about that Guitar Center riff on the last episode. It's like, this is the Guitar Center riff, right? It's that simple riff that's like just fucking cool. It just sounds awesome. And the funny thing too is that like so much of the song now is associated with the superhero Iron Man, when in fact the song had like, if I remember correctly, had nothing to do with the Marvel character. It was just like this like random sort of monster movie track that Ozzy had in his head. Riffs are cool, just like moments in the song, the latter portions where they like they do that like galloping at the end, like it's just cool, it's just awesome. But then you talk about galloping and you talk about Children of the Grave, which is probably one of the coolest gallop riffs like ever, and just like everything the band is doing, and you got that like midsection where it slows down. It's just burn, 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 burn. Like it's just cool, man. It's just awesome. It's one of those things where like at this moment right now, as I'm talking, I don't know which song I like more. Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to like talk my way through it.
So at the beginning of the episode, I said that Master of Reality made me headbang 3 times, and this is number 2.
Yeah.
I made the stankiest face that I've ever made in my life because I had not listened to this song in like years. And so it hit, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And like you were saying about fatigue, I am fatigued from Iron Man. And I think it's because throughout history, we now have so many more songs that have that similar kind of pace of just like big riff, big fucking guitar riff. And then it kind of, and then it hits and it's anthemic and it tracks. And I think that for its merits, Children of the Grave does more in terms of being a heavy metal song instead of being almost like a hard rock song. You know, you can hear Sabbath kind of finding the final path, which is that like that doom riff, you know, that 4-3-2, that dun dun dun, kind of evil, sinister, insidious kind of vibe to their riffs, which were all over the very first Black Sabbath record. And for as much as I believe that, and Mike, I told you this, but I don't think I've mentioned it yet. For as much as I believe that Sleep's Holy Mountain does Master of Reality perfect, I think that Children of the Grave absolutely blows Iron Man out of the water.
I don't know if I can co-sign blows it out of the water, but I can probably co-sign that it's the better track in this matchup. You had a good point with the fatigue of Iron Man. It's like, I feel like I know every second of that song. Like I can do the whole 4-minute song right now in like the da-na-da-na-na. Like I could just go through the whole thing. Children of the Grave, I couldn't. I've heard that song hundreds, maybe not hundreds. I've heard it many times, but it's still like, you're right. The second it comes in, I'm just like stank face, head banging. The midsection comes and I'm doing it even harder now. It's just like that song never gets old. Never. Whereas Iron Man, I could definitely see getting old. So I'll join you. I'll join Children of the Grave being the better matchup or the better choice here.
That is song 2 of 3 that made me almost uncontrollably headbang on Master of Reality.
If your third song, I'm not going to spoil it right now, but if your third song is not the song I'm thinking of, I'm going to be so disappointed. But we'll get there when we get there.
We will.
Again, we have, for number 5, we have another unfair matchup, which is Electric Funeral versus Orchid. Again, I like Orchid. Orchid's very cool, but at best, it's just an interlude song. That's really all it serves.
Yeah.
So really no contest here, but you can definitely talk about Orchid and Electric Funeral. But I think as far as a matchup goes, there's just really no contest here.
I don't think so. I think Electric Funeral might actually be my least favorite song on Paranoid.
Okay.
And I think it's just because it's kind of slammed there in the middle. And for as much as I just said that Iron Man has like fatigued itself in my own brain, I mean, come on, dude. It's like comfortably numb. I could listen to that song every day for 6 hours continuously and be like, yeah, that's still cool. None of this is annoying, you know?
Yeah, Electric Funeral is interesting because like the main guitar riff, it's just like they dipped that shit in acid and just let it soak for 5 minutes. And then Tony was like, all right, I guess I'll play the guitar now while it's still dripping acid off of it. It just like sounds like it's toxic. Like he's gaining cancer while playing this riff. That's what it sounds like to me. And again, it's just cool. It's just cool that he did that. It's cool that it sounds like that. I will not agree that it's my least favorite. Again, there's 2 songs on here that I think are kind of not dragging. I like all the songs on Paranoid.
Yeah.
Planet Caravan and a different song that's not Electric Funeral, I think, are the 2 duds, if there's any duds on the record.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think Electric Funeral is awesome. Like, it's still a great song. So,
yeah.
But again, it's as far as as far as these two matching up together, no real contest, unfortunately.
No.
So then, Hand of Doom versus Lord of this World. Do you want to start?
Hand of Doom is too long. There's no reason. There's not a single reason that Hand of Doom should be seven minutes. Whereas Lord of this World, I tell you what, they kind of tightened up a little bit. And they said, all right, guys, we're not doing any super crazy long ones except for Solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in the track listing of Paranoid, the way that the record flows, Hand of Doom almost always brings it to a complete stop for me.
Wow.
Because it's a good song. Just not enough happens.
For me, the cool things about Hand of Doom for me is that, again, this showcases the prowess of the band members, but Bill Ward could have easily just done a basic 4-count drum beat in the moments that leads up to the big loud like all that stuff.
Yep.
And instead he does like this jazz influence, sort of like hitting the snares of the like that kind of thing. And it's just like any other metal musician, again, metal was new at the time, but any other musician probably would have just done the basic hi-hat on every one, alternate bass and snare hit, like that kind of thing. And then Bill Ward's like, no, man, that's not going to be cool enough. Like, we have to do this. And it makes it like that much cooler. So for that, I kind of really like Hand of Doom. I do think it's long, but I don't know if it's too long. If it was like 8 minutes, maybe. But I think I never get to the end of Hand of Doom going, man, that was just too long. They could have shaved a minute off of that. Whereas with Lord of this World, I think that it's doing cool stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think of these tracks, the one I'd more accurately say is running too long would be Lord of this World.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think then?
So I think again, we're kind of like, this is just a landslide runaway at this point, but I'd probably give it to Hand of Doom personally. I think Hand of Doom is more memorable for me. Memorable, I should say. The moments in Hand of Doom I remember more than the moments in Lord of this World. It's a song I'll leave with more memory of listening to it than Lord of this World, which is why I would give it the slight edge.
Yeah, I would say the musicianship on Hand of Doom edges it out.
Mm-hmm.
I just sometimes, man, it's like, why does this have to be 7 minutes?
Sure. And
know?
as far as like the runaway tracks on Paranoid, it's not one of them.
No.
It's like a middle tier track for me. It's definitely not hitting the high ends. But again, at this point, we didn't count tracks 3 and track 5 given their matchup. But are you going with Hand of Doom?
Yeah, I'll take Hand of Doom.
Yes. Okay, so it's definitely running away at the moment. However, oh man. Okay, let's get to the last two matchups because I think this is where it gets really interesting. I said there was 2 songs on Paranoid that kind of bring it down for me, and despite the fact that I'm a drummer, I think Rat Salad is actually one of the weakest tracks on Paranoid.
Really?
Yes. Now, it's going up against Solitude, and I'll get to Solitude in a second. Rat Salad's really cool. I like it a lot. It's sort of that Moby Dick moment that was on Led Zeppelin 2, where you just go, hey, Bill Ward's great, just give him 2 minutes to go insane. In the case of Bonham, it was more like 5, right? But
yeah.
Here, it's like, it's a cool drum solo, but it doesn't blow me away. Like, and maybe that's because I was born in 1994 and I had years of music after this moment of like amazing drummers who kind of do this better. I'm sure for the time it was incredible and for the time it was really cool, but hearing it now, I'm just like, yeah, but I have Neil Peart over here. Like,
that's what I was about to say.
I can go to him, like, because he blows me away every time. Again, Bill Ward's amazing. I'm not denouncing Bill Ward's ability here, but just like I get to the end of Rat Salad, I'm like, yeah, it was cool, but it kind of feels like Embryo and Orchid does on Master of Reality, which is like, it just kind of feels like this sort of interlude track before Fairies Wear Boots. Whereas Solitude, I think Solitude is amazing. In fact, Solitude's actually one of my favorite songs on Master of Reality. Whereas Planet Caravan did the slow, vibey sort of thing. It was just kind of like whatever. Solitude does it and then like takes it to the next level, for me at least. It's very similar. In fact, I think an interesting matchup here is Planet Caravan versus Solitude, but we'll get to that. I think Solitude's just a greater moment on track 7 than Rat Salad is for track 7. And then they add the flute and they just do like these slight variations on the theme. I think Solitude's amazing.
Yeah, honestly, I think I just have to, not to cop it out, I think I just have to agree with everything you said. I don't think you could give a better description of my feeling as well. Rat Salad, for me, though, this is weird. It always feels like when you see a waiter bringing your food out. Because, man, fairies wear boots. That song kicks my fucking ass, Mike.
Well, we'll get there.
We will. But, so, I'm putting that right there. So, knowing that fairies is coming after, I sit through Rat Salad and I'm like, yeah, I know what's coming after this, dude. But I think in comparison, just track by track, I think you're correct.
Yes. Now, what would you say to Planet Caravan versus Solitude?
Caravan.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. I just like it more. I think it's definitely because I've spent way more time with Paranoid.
Sure.
Like, this is a record that I have 3 different presses of. I've got my dad's from when he was a child, my uncle's from when he was a child, and one that I bought when they like repressed it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Master of Reality, as much time as I have spent with these songs, it's also something that like, it isn't the Sabbath that I go to, except for like Sweet Leaf.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I value Paranoid. I've listened to Paranoid way more than Master of Reality, but I think, again, not to spoil it, I think Master of Reality brings the heat in the end, as opposed to the beginning. And Solitude, I think, is them doing something different, but doing it like really taking advantage of doing something different.
Yeah.
Whereas Planet Caravan is just like, yeah, let's do something different. And then by the end of it, I'm like, okay, that was cool. I'll come back to it. But by the end of Solitude, I'm like, man, that was really cool. Like, that was cool how they did that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The flute is a nice touch, man.
Yes.
When it came in, I was like, oh, this is nice. This isn't just loud guitar.
How beautiful for them to take this moment.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you open with Fairies versus Into the Void.
All right. Fairies is one of the coolest guitar sounds ever. I think they had delay pedals back then. I don't know if they did. That delay section in the beginning is mind-blowing. But I will admit, dude, Into the Void was headbang 3 of 3.
Thank God.
It hit, and I put my head back. I went, oh no. Fairies Wear Boots is a great song for Paranoid era Black Sabbath in terms of they are about to elevate themselves to that top level of we've now essentially, in my opinion, started heavy metal with Black Sabbath. And then record 2, nailed it. Perfect. Why is there this weird, like, kind of hard rock song on it? Where in comparison to Into the Void, feels like a grand, like a D&D Grand Wizard walking in. It feels like Gandalf fighting the Balrog. It happened. I said, this is badass, and I can't even cope for the other song.
Yeah, so this is a really fascinating matchup because I love Fairies Wear Boots. In fact, it's my second favorite song on Paranoid behind War Pigs. And that's because, again, the musicians decide to do something different with it. You know, Bill Ward does that swing beat. That's just so perfect. Like, it's so cool. I will say, though, with Fairies Wear Boots is that the Jack the Stripper portion, which is like the intro, I could do without it, honestly. In fact,
Really?
It's one of those things where like it's playing and I'm like, this is cool, but man, I can't wait till that swing beat comes in. and then the swing beat comes in. I'm like, okay, now we're in the song, right? So for that, I give it a little flack, but that swing section is just so good that like it kind of trumps a lot of other stuff on Paranoid. But bro, just the
Yeah.
oh, it's so good every time, every fucking time.
I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I assume you have, where something is so awesome that it makes you giggle.
Oh yeah,
Like for those who haven't seen somehow Endgame, when Cap gets Mjolnir, I just giggled
spoilers.
because spoilers. I just giggled because I was like, I can't. Nothing's gonna top this.
It's exactly what you wanted to happen. And
Mhm.
Into the Void coming in is exactly what I want to happen, which is, all right, Master of Reality, you got one more song. What are you going to do with it? And then they literally just like drop the bomb of Into the Void. And it's like, my God, like you made the coolest song ever. And then they get into like the proper portion of the song, like the sort of I don't know the term for it, right? But, and even that's cool. Even that's awesome. Like every part of Into the Void is just like killer.
Yeah.
Killer way to go out. And unfortunately, Fairies Wear Boots is also a killer way to go out, but I'm sorry, Into the Void just stomps it. Like, it's just so good.
To the listener at home, close your eyes and think about the logo of Black Sabbath. Think about those two words together. You probably hear something that sounds like Scooby-Doo chase music. Into the Void hits that exact feeling of goofy, but also so mind-blowingly heavy that you can't even begin to fathom it happening. That is what Into the Void does.
Yeah, it feels like a planet crashing into another planet. Like it's just megatons of force, and all it is just a guitar. Just Tony playing the guitar, and yet he makes it sound like it's eons of like planetary force coming at you.
Yeah,
It's so good.
There is that section where him and Geezer, they do lock into the riff together.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, every single time I'm like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
My miles per gallon is going down because the car is getting heavier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's I mean I can't say enough good about it. If every song on Master of Reality was as good as Into the Void, it'd be like no contest at that point in terms of like how good this record is. And like I said, I really feel like the record just like kind of shoots everything it's got in the end of it, and this is the testament to that. Like it's just so good.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
But unfortunately, apparently, it's not good enough because in the essence of what we're doing here, Planet Caravan versus Embryo, Electric Funeral versus Orchid, again, it's really no contest. So at the end of the day, technically, Paranoid wins the track by track. But if you remove those unfair matchups, it's actually tied. Which is to say, War Pigs beat Sweetleaf, Paranoid beat After Forever, and Hand of Doom beat Lord of this World. But Children beat Iron Man, Solitude beat Salad, and Into the Void beat Fairies. So it's literally a 3-3 split. So I'm still sitting here going, what is the better record? But, well, again, technically, you're discounting Electric Funeral and Planet Caravan for what they're doing. But still, man, not to say that Master of Reality doesn't come with the heat, because at times it does.
It does. It's really big moments of success are, for me at least, when Black Sabbath just do Black Sabbath. They later on in their future, like I said, they'll do ballads. Singers will come and go. At one point, it'll just be Tony Iommi with session players. But there is a core sound that you kind of, I guess, audialize when you think of Black Sabbath. And it's those chunky, big, single note, like, guitar riffs. Whether it be the riff in Iron Man, or whether it be Into the Void, or, like, Sweetleaf. The issue with Master of Reality is that it doesn't do that so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they would later on with Volume 4. I think once they get to Volume 4, they figured out the exact way how to do experimentation. It's just following a record that is so monumental, like Paranoid. it's kind of hard to.
Yeah.
At least in comparison. You know?
Yeah, totally. Well, as far as track by track, that sort of wraps that up. I do want to briefly, and I know we did this last episode, but I do want to briefly talk about the packaging and the front covers of both these records. If I'm not mistaken, Paranoid, the album, was originally supposed to be called War Pigs. That's what they wanted to go with. But then the record label said, hey, we can't have that for, again, it was 1970. So like War Pigs was apparently too risque or explicit or something. So they went with Paranoid. War Pigs makes more sense for the cover, but I still kind of, and I don't know if this is a hot take, I kind of hate the cover of Paranoid. The dude charging with this, it just kind of looks stupid. I'm sorry to say.
It looks very unprepared.
Yes.
I think that so here is where I knew this was going to head. That, at least immensely, audio-wise, I think the Paranoid is better. But this conversation has shown we're kind of sitting in the middle of both. I think that the packaging for Master of Reality is damn near perfect.
Yeah, it's strange, though, because it's so simple. It's just words and a black background.
I think that's what it has to be.
Yeah.
I think that making a big statement like that is cool when you decide to put your foot down and actually make that choice. Instead of like, oh, we need this beautiful image. No. Fuck it. Black Sabbath, Master Reality. The kids are going to buy it. Yeah. What does it say about the record? What's song 1? Sweet Leaf. What is that song about? Changing your reality. How cool marijuana is that it changes your reality. What's Into the Void about? Shifting reality. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas I think that Paranoid, you look at that cover and it's like, oh yeah, this is probably going to be like guitar music. I feel like you look at Master of Reality and you go, this is a fucking heavy metal record, dude.
Yeah.
You know?
And again, the way it influenced like everything that came after it in terms of like packaging or just the sort of semblance of metal and the representation of metal, it did a lot for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah. And you know, back to Paranoid for a second. Is that dude who's with the sword, is he wearing like a space alien outfit or something? It just doesn't look like anything.
He's wearing like spandex, like underwear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it looks like something from Planet 9 from outer space. Like it just doesn't look right. It's just weird. And again, maybe they had like a day left to come up with the cover and they're like, okay, let's just go in the woods at night and have you run at the camera and we'll kind of like make it have an echo effect. It's just dumb. It's just stupid. I just don't like it.
It is. And you know, I think too, is people who enjoy like metal music, heavy metal music, whatever you'd like to call it, there's a level of like suspension of disbelief that you have to put for thinking of things as an adult. Like, listen to the band Ghost and tell me that isn't Scooby-Doo chase music. You know?
Yeah.
Some things, though, get a little too silly. Like, the Generation Swine cover by Motley Crue. It's a little too silly. Paranoid just delves a little too deep into, it just doesn't feel right for what this has to be, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also, too, if you look at, like I said, like Volume 4 immediately after that, they keep a similar design aspect of it's black background, something cool is happening on the side, got the name, got the title. That's it.
Yeah, for sure. The things we talked about on Ride the Lightning and Master were performances, solos. I really don't think there's a conversation to be had here. Maybe not. I think the performances are like even keeled in terms of both records. Solos, I feel the same way. I think the only difference is that Paranoid came first, so therefore, like you said with Ride, it's a band that has something to prove on Paranoid, so maybe it gets the edge in that regard. But unlike Ride the Lightning vs. Master Puppets, where I'm like, yeah, the Ride solos really feel like Kirk really went full blow for it. Here, I don't think there's really too much delineation between the two. I think both have great guitar solos. I think both have even keeled performances throughout. So I don't know if you feel any differently.
The only song that I have to mention, God, it might have been After Forever, where there is this weird, it's like flubby drum. Is it like a tom? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's one of the longer songs on the record.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this drum sound that sounds like it sounded like if you unplugged a bass and you like played it fingerstyle, just the noise of like fingers hitting strings. And it bothered me the entire song because it came in about halfway through, and I was just like, "What is this sound? Are my speakers going bad? Like, did I do something wrong to my car?" And then the song ended. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Just interesting
Oh.
choices like that. Um, I think though, I honestly would like to say the Master of Reality lead guitar tone, I think, is a little better.
Hmm. Okay, yeah. I mean, for me, I think it, it feels different for sure, but they also feel kind of similar in their sort of tones, as it were. So,
Yeah. I
but
don't
yeah.
know. It just feels like there's more gain on it, but it's also not uncontrollable, but it just has this certain excitement. Like, yeah, every time I hear the intro to Sweet Leaf, I'm like, God, that's such a good sounding guitar.
Mm-hmm.
But granted, at the same time, Paranoid has an equally good sounding guitar. I just think Master of Reality sounds just a little better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly we had I don't know. I don't know what else to really say about the two records. Again, I love them both. I'm not trying to. I know we've upset plenty of Black Sabbath fans by saying Paranoid's better. Um, of course, it's just our opinions. Of course, you don't have to agree with them, et cetera, et cetera. But unlike last episode where we went on for an hour and a half, I'm not really sure what else to say about these two records other than I think they're both great and that I would be upset if I existed in a world where both these records or either of these records didn't exist.
Okay, well then here's what I guess the decider is going to be. Is the kind of ground zero big bang point of Master of Reality essentially kickstarting stoner metal more important than the widespread influence of Paranoid?
Um, that's tough only because there's arguments for both. I think it really depends who you ask. I think for me personally, the sort of long view of Paranoid and what songs like Iron Man and War Pigs and the song Paranoid did for metal, for me personally, is more important. But sludge and doom and those metal genres were never really my favorite genres out of metal. More of a thrash, more of prog metal kind of guy personally. So for me, I value Paranoid and what it did more than Master of Reality, but I could see the totally inverse conversation where Master of Reality sort of birthed these other genres, and so therefore its legacy should be held up higher. I think it's just more of like a personal thing.
And see, my argument, this isn't a personal thing. This is a part of the conversation now, Mike. My
Mm-hmm.
my whole stance is Master of Reality is good, but I still say that Sleep did it better. I think that in terms of Black Sabbath records, Paranoid sits on top, where Master of Reality is more of a blueprint for something that somebody else did perfect. Just because you make something doesn't mean you have to be the one to perfect it. And I think going and listening to Into the Void, Children of Grave, um, Sweet Leaf, you listen to those songs and it's like Kai's did this better. I'm okay with that. You know,
But
Dragonaut is the best version of Sweet Leaf.
but don't you think that I mean not any band, but there's a lot of bands that could have done Paranoid, for example, better than Black Sabbath?
No, I don't. I think that in everybody's life you have this one moment where you create or you say something that is so subconsciously influential to everybody who surrounds you that is your moment, and I think that is Paranoid is Black Sabbath's moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Definitely fair points. Um, yeah, I mean it's hard to really contest either of these records. Although, I mean, you're saying the claim about a band doing the record better. I don't know. I feel like that's most anything in life, but of course, it's Black Sabbath. You know, they're the forefathers. So
Yeah.
how can anyone do it better than them? I don't know.
And I think that's the stance on Paranoid. Is like no
Mhm.
one would ever be able. People have tried, but no one's ever going to do Back in Black ever
Yeah.
again. That's where it is. Or let's pick another one. Like no one's ever going to do Dark Side of the Moon. That was it. People
Mhm.
have tried and people have taken the formula, but no one's going to hit that moment in like the zeitgeist of what I would say for Paranoid's pluses and its minuses, pros and cons. It's about as close to a perfect record as you could get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything more to say than that? I don't know.
I don't think so. Where are we walking out on this one?
Well, I mean, I feel bad going against so many Black Sabbath people to say that Master of Reality is not better, but I think in our personal stake, Paranoid is the better record. Or the more preferred, I should say. Not that it's better, but that we just prefer it more.
For all of you metal nerds out there,
Yes,
this is Cody Constantine saying that Paranoid is better.
I mean, I kind of have to stand with you on that one. It's certainly
I need the horn. The
air horn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a Black Sabbath conversation with an air horn. I'm sure they saw that when they were writing Into the Void.
They did. That's what all that white stuff was for.
Yeah. All right. Well, we did have one person, not going to name names, but one person who said it went on a little bit too long last time. So I guess this is for you, my friend. We're almost at an hour, and I think we're done. I think we wrapped this thing up.
We did. Is there anything you'd like to say at the end?
I'm probably just going to go listen to Into the Void after this.
Honestly,
I think that's what's going to happen here. Yeah.
I will leave everybody with this. This podcast has made me revisit music that I haven't listened to in years. And I think the best thing that you could do is go through a band that you like, look at their discography, and choose 2 records. Because maybe at the end of the day, you'll stumble back onto a riff like Into the Void. And then you'll drive down a 2-lane highway and go, yeah, life ain't that bad. You know?
I thought you were going to say drive it down a 2-lane highway and go, I could go 40 miles per hour faster than I'm currently going. Because that's usually what happens when Into the Void comes on for me.
I paid for 160 on the Kia. I'm getting 160 out of the Kia.
Yeah. Because when Into the Void kicks in for me, I'm like, how far is my foot on the pedal? It could go further. All right, man. Well, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening, as always. Yeah, man. I'm excited for the next one.
I'm excited for the next one, too. Be well, everybody.
Take care.